Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending the graveyard shift, as it seems to have been nicknamed. Couple of things first. Obviously, I'd like to extend thanks to Shannon and the team at AMCA for the opportunity to come and talk to you guys. Shannon's kind of keen for us to share what we've learned over the last 20 years, what we're seeing happening in the future, and what improvements we can make. So that's what we're here. I'm going to talk about the general subject matter is going to be fire-resistant ductwork, but passive fire protection in general. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a number of things. We shall move down. That's me. So Steve's already told you 30 odd years in this. I know I don't look that old, but it's true. I'm the current chair of the British Standards Committee for Fire-Resistant Ductwork, and I took that position because I wanted to be able to influence and make changes. That basically means that on behalf of the UK, I go into Europe and I sit with the European Standard Development Committees. I help to write the standards, help to modify them so that we're trying to do the best we can to give us a chance of when we're doing our testing, we get the products that do what we want them to do. Okay, so that's my passion. I'm a member of the TG6 Technical Committee at the ASFP, that's the Association for Specialist Fire Protection. Again, so very much engaged in industry and what we're doing and how we can improve. So that's me. The running order, we're going to talk about why are we doing this, what is the catalyst for change. We're going to talk about industry collaboration, and you're going to hear the word collaboration a lot. And to be honest, if you're not going to bed tonight and thinking of the word collaboration, then I've failed. Okay, critical. We're going to go through standards, regulations, codes. We're going to touch on that. We're going to touch a little bit on the test methods. Very importantly, certification. And last but not least, building design, okay? So that's what we're talking about. So I've been here today. I've listened to some fantastic presentations. We have made leaps and bounds, in my eyes, in terms of what we can do with technology. We've got robotic dogs that can do surveying. We can take a visual tour through a building. We can have a look at it that way. Absolutely incredible what we can do now. The changes that I've seen over the last 20 years, absolutely incredible. Okay? But I'm going to pause a minute. And I know everyone has heard about Grenfell, but that can't happen again, ever. And this is why we're all here. We're trying to improve. How do we stop this from happening again? Okay, 72 people lost their lives there, and the inquiry that came out of it afterwards, Dame Judith Hackett called it a system failure. Okay, a system failure. That's like start to finish. Okay, and it wasn't just the cladding. There were other elements of Grenfell. The doors should have lasted 30 minutes. They were tested, lasted 15. All sorts of problems came out of that. Okay, so we're not just looking at one thing in isolation, we're looking at a whole system failure. And it's not just a UK problem, it's an international issue. Everywhere we're suffering, lack of probably initial design collaboration. The specialists of the industry are not being spoken to enough. And basically what I'd like to say is, before I came out here, I didn't have a lot of notice. It all happened rather quickly. But doing a little bit of research, I found an Australian publication, Rebuilding Confidence. Hopefully some of you might be familiar with that. But it pretty much mirrors and echoes everything that came out of the Building a Safer Future, in terms of Dame Judith Hackett and what she came up with. And the improvements that she came up with that are now starting to be implemented into the regulations. Okay? We've also got a new regulator that falls under the Health and Safety Executive. Okay, so we've now started to put the teeth into the legislation. 5 fundamental problems, okay, pointed out as part of the inquiry and the reports that came from it. Ignorance. What we're talking about here is either ambiguity with the standards, the regulations, in the first place, i.e. the way they're written, or a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of what they're actually meaning. What are they asking us to do? That's the first one. Indifference, or a race to the bottom, as it's often been called. Build it fast, build it cheap. Okay, that's what we're talking about there. And then ownership, lack of clarity on who's responsible for what and at which stage of the process, from design to build to handover for the occupants. Inadequate enforcement, so we don't have the legislation in place to actually be able to enforce what we're trying to achieve. And then, last but not least, penalties, inadequate penalties. We're not punishing enough, so there's no deterrent, okay? I attended, shortly before I came over, an ASFP event, a fire safety event, and found out that there's a new group been formed in the UK, the Passive Fire Knowledge Group. And in orange there, you can see their strapline is leading culture change through collaboration. Okay, that's what they're there to do. They're a non-for-profit organisation, and they're made up of Tier 1 contractors in the main, relevant trade associations, so people like the ASFP, but they're also engaging with specialists. So for passive fire protection, the people that are manufacturing it, the people that are installing it, okay? And they're focusing on 3 main things. Process, spatial planning. So in terms of building services, probably the most fundamental problem that we face is a lack of space. Okay, and in particular for ductwork, which is generally the biggest service that we have, we're quite often being very, very reactive when we get to site and we've got to fit a duct down a corridor or up a riser, and we haven't got enough room to do it. The problem there being is we're not being engaged as specialists early on enough in the design stage. Then we've got to look at the fire safety operation of the building. What does it need to do? How do we evacuate? You know, what fundamentally do we need to do to make that building safe for the people that are going to be using it? In terms of classification, the other issue we have is that we need to understand how are we going to provide this protection, okay? And that involves a multitude of applications, services. We've got to make sure that if we're building a wall and we want a 2-hour rated wall, have we got a 2-hour rated duct that will go through it? Have we got a 2-hour rated penetration detail? And do we have the space to fit it so that it's compliant and can be certified? Okay, so classification, what I mean by that is we basically need to look at the whole picture, not just individual elements of it. Then we need to understand how it needs to be installed. And again, I go back to the lack of space problem. You know, on paper, things can look really good. But when we come to the reality of fitting it, it can be somewhat different. We've then got to maintain it. So when the building's handed over, the building owners are going to be able to maintain it. So all these things come into play. And then lastly, defining responsibility. That's from concept through design phase and into the build and beyond. So testing, what can we do? So the idea at the moment of the Passive Fire Knowledge Group is that they're starting to look at, okay, we know that we can go and buy a fire-rated duct, or we can go and buy a fire-rated door or a window or anything else, but where are the shortfalls? So for example, if we think about a castellated beam in a building with a firewall built underneath it, and we're going to put a service through that beam, is there a tested detail for that? Probably not, okay? So these guys are now going to sit and they're going to look at all the fundamental issues that we get in design, and we're going to start making a wish list of how do we overcome it. Can we talk to the testing authorities? Can we get a sponsor who can provide the material and we can maybe even run a test? And we're going to gradually chip away at filling in the holes, okay? Pardon the pun. We're going to collaborate with various authorities, fire engineers. We're going to start talking to each other. And, you know, really, like I was saying when I first started, fantastic technological advances, but I think we've kind of lost the art a little bit of just talking to each other, sharing information. And in order to do that and make some of the changes, we've got to have participation of the standards committees, because ultimately they're the guys writing the standards that we're all trying to comply to. Okay? Education, sharing of information. I think this forum has been fantastic. I've been really impressed with the sharing of information, the willingness to drive it forward and the collaboration, and educating. Now that can sometimes sound a little bit condescending, okay, but it's not meant to be that way. What we're trying to do is, so for example, our business, we've been doing hundreds, literally, of CPDs with the consultants, the tier one contractors, basically saying, look guys, this is what we need. You know, we're putting that information out there earlier, and we're actually starting to see a change. You know, ordinarily, we would never get approached by a tier one contractor. We would be dealing probably with a mechanical contractor or possibly the end user. But we're starting to get approached now. Okay, Mark, what do we need to do? What size of hole in a wall do we need to build so that you can put your system in and certify it? And we don't end up in this scenario where we can't certify it, and probably the poor fire stopping guy is going to be asked to come up with a solution, and he can't certify it because he doesn't know if it's going to work. Okay? So education, and then we get into training. Competency. We've got to start to be able to demonstrate competency. And again, I think we've got an awful lot of work to do there, but we're starting to gain traction. Okay? We need to engage with the influencers. So I've mentioned CPDs. That's what we've been running, and those are the types of people that we've been talking to. But it's not just them, it's anybody. Anybody who's involved in the process. We have to talk with them. So where can we start? Ambiguity is probably one of our biggest enemies. I know I can name a number of standards now that are in existence. So for example, we have the ASFP Blue Book, which tells us that a kitchen extract system needs to be fire rated from the point it leaves the kitchen compartment. BS 9999 tells us it needs to be fire rated from the canopy. So we've got conflicting information. And that's not just that, you know, we have a number of instances where that happens. We also have regulations and codes written that are not prescriptive enough. It doesn't tell us what standard do we need to test to. Some are good, others have gaps in them. So what happens then? If you've got a gap, people interpret what is required, okay? We need a consistent approach, so we don't want dilution. You know, we want to continue and make sure that everywhere we are, we have it done consistently. So as I say, prescribed test methods and accreditation, incredibly important. Then we know what we're working to. And third-party certification. Third-party certification was one of the recommendations out of the Dame Judith Hackett report. In terms of fire protection, she's basically said it should be mandatory that you have third-party certified products. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So what can we improve? We can align things. Okay, so this has already kind of happened in Europe. We have, in 2013, the construction products regulations came into force, and that basically meant that if there was a harmonized European standard published, we had to follow it, okay? And the idea being that throughout Europe, and even though us Brits are no longer obviously in the party, we can work anywhere because we're working to the same set of standards. They've been harmonized. You can go to France, Germany, England, Ireland, and we can say, right, well, we've got it tested to this, should be accepted. So that's kind of already started to happen. It would be lovely to see that more globally. I think we also have gone away from assessments. So big changes have been made. We are going away from assessment or engineering judgments. So things are being much more performance-based. So from the old British standards to the European standards, we used to be able to test a rectangular horizontal duct and get an assessment for a vertical. Okay, the European regime has stopped all that, so now you have to test everything. You prove the performance by testing. We want specific criteria for the function of the system. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture about that in a minute. And we need to make sure that the standards meet the industry needs. Now that might sound obvious, but not always does it happen, because you don't always have the people engaged on the standards writing committees that actually understand the industry needs. Okay, so again, we need to ensure the right people are engaged. And then a global rule. So if we have a test furnace that's 3 meters by 4 meters, which is the general size, what do we do if we've got a duct that's bigger than that? And we do have them. Okay. So how do we overcome that? We need to find a sensible method of coming up with a way of assessing something that cannot be covered by testing. So the picture up there, that's a European test standard for a smoke control duct. This is going back now to the specific criteria. Okay, the green blobs that you can see up there, those are attachments of wires. And they are measuring deflection of the duct. So if you look to the right-hand side of the picture, you can see the furnace wall. Okay, the ducting is this is generally to simulate the next compartment. So the furnace is the fire compartment. This is outside, so the next compartment. We're measuring deflection. We're also measuring leakage. Now, the European standard is the only standard I've come across up to now. And I know the American standards, Malaysia and Hong Kong. This is basically the only standard I've come across that actually measures leakage. So we're talking about smoke. So, that should be a good thing to have. We've also got, for kitchen extract ducts, methods of measuring combustible linings and the insulation performance. Okay, so the picture on the left-hand side is 2 ducts coming outside the wall. You can see all the green wires there attached to thermocouples, and they're measuring temperature rise on the outside of the duct. Okay? Idea being, if it goes over 140 degrees, it fails, or 180 degrees in one spot, it will fail. And the one on the right are basically the wires. You can't actually see the thermocouples, but they're measuring the temperature inside the duct, inside the furnace, to simulate a combustible lining. So these are specific requirements. What we want to do, or ideally we want to do, is to pick the worst case scenario for the system function and then test to that. Now that's some way off if it ever happens, but that's what we should be working towards. Let's have a look what these systems need to do. So we've done our testing. We've now got to prove that the product that's been put on the market is actually the same as what we've tested. And this is where third-party certification comes in. So basically, this can be the test house, but must be accredited, or it could be an independent organisation, a certification body. They don't always have to do the test. They can be independent. But the critical part is they are accredited to do what they're coming to do. Okay, what they're going to do is they're going to turn up at the factory of the manufacturer, and they're going to verify every piece of steel, nut, bolt, washer, sealant, gasket, everything that was used in the test is actually being used in the manufacture process. Traceability, they're going to ask you to provide evidence of where you've bought the material from and evidence to confirm it actually is what you've ordered. Okay, to the correct standard, for example. What that does then is when you've had your audit, and that could be once a year, it could be 4 times a year, depending on which country you're in and which certification body it is, but they give you a certificate. That certificate will tell you Yes, we verify that this product is being made as it should be and as it was tested. Okay? It's fit for purpose. It gives it a classification. It tells us what performance that product has. And that gives the assurance to the engineers, the designers, the authorities, and ultimately the building owners and the occupants that actually, yeah, what we've done here is correct. It will work if there is a fire. So an example of a certificate of constancy of performance up there. And I think those three words, the constancy of performance, is key. What we're saying is we're verifying that every time that product goes out the door, it will achieve that performance, okay? So on the right-hand side there, I've just put in bolder letters, that wouldn't normally be there, but just to make it clear, what we're saying is that's an FRL 120, 120, 120, that's its classification, or the European method is underneath, okay? Just to say, that's what this product will achieve, and the third party are verifying it. So it's not the manufacturer, we've got third-party verification. This, I think, hopefully is what you'll take away probably most out of this. Design, okay? We need earlier engagement for fire protection products. I've mentioned already that the lack of space that always is a major problem. The coordination of the services is often a problem. Penetration details, though, you know, what we're trying to actually protect is the compartmentation of the building. Yeah? Structural considerations. So if we're asking for a fire-resistant product, we really need to provide a structure that's capable of carrying it. And we need to design out weak points, and there always will be weak points, particularly with inline equipment that won't have been tested. So we need to think about that. And then we need to think about the installation and the maintenance. Okay, because at some point, somebody's going to need to maintain everything that's in there. So, that's one of our ducts, the red flame you can see. Can anyone think of what could possibly go wrong there? Don't be shy. So, that duct needs to stay where it is to perform. Doesn't it? It needs to fulfill its function, stability, one of the three criteria for testing. It needs to stay where it is. That pipe work that you can see running above it, is that designed for fire? How it's supported, is that designed for fire? So let's say there's a fire in there and that pipe work collapses. What's going to happen to the duct potentially? It may collapse, so it can no longer fulfill its function. So this sort of thing needs to be considered very early. Yeah, we need to make sure that we haven't got things that can collapse onto systems that could then cause them to fail. That's one. Penetration details. Okay, so how often do we walk on site and we'll see a huge hole in a wall and all manner of services going through it? We've got our cables going through, pipe work, duct work. Can that be certified as an as-tested arrangement? I would suggest unlikely. I'm not going to say it's not possible, but unlikely. So then what happens is the fire-stopping guy gets told to go and fill that hole in, and you know that's what he's tried to do there. As you can see, there's still some gaping holes left, but can they say that's going to work? Probably not. Okay, so we need to start thinking about what do we have? What do we have that's tested? Can we put that in? Can we coordinate the services so that we can achieve a certified, finished, fit-for-purpose system? Yeah? That does work. That is a picture of a single duct going through a single hole that has been formed exactly to our requirements. Okay? And we're certifying that as a manufacturer. No further need for a fire-stopping guy. We've basically put in there what has been tested and proven to work, but we need the space to do it. So that needs to be thought about really early in the design phase. And then lastly, the structure. Every third-party assessment report will make a statement in the front end of it to say, we assume that the structure to which this ductwork is being attached is fire-rated and load-bearing, okay? But what do we get? Sometimes we'll get a tin roof with some insulation over the top, 6 metres apart, structural steel work, and we've got to hang this stuff at 1.5 metre maximum centres. So structural consideration, again, front-end design. It's critical. We've got to be engaging fire protection products. We need to be engaging right at the design phase. Now, I can't see that well in here, but have we got any architects in the room? Well, so you get a couple of hands going up, okay? How often do you guys talk to passive fire protection product manufacturers? Not often, probably. Fundamentally, there lies the problem. You know, so we're going right back here to spatial awareness and spatial design of buildings. And the guys that are running that and looking after that, the front end, are the architects. Okay? So collaboration, I'm going to mention it again, collaboration. We need to talk to each other. We need to look how we can work with each other to make sure we can improve things going forward. Last but not least, financial cost of Grenfell at the end of April has been estimated at 2 billion Australian dollars. Okay? Pretty scary. And the value engineering has been estimated, this is based on the cladding spec, about 560,000. Okay? So not good figures, but even worse figures is that. Okay? And that should stick in everyone's mind. I'm going to finish off. I was perusing an ASFP document last week on penetration details and the recommendations. And I found in the foreword of that document that statement by Dame Judith Hackett, and I think it reflects everything I've just said in far fewer words, in that collaboration between the relevant trade bodies, organisations, is essential. Okay? We need to do it. We need to focus on it more. We need to try harder. And we need to make sure that we make buildings safer in the future. When we work together, we can achieve that. Okay? So that's pretty much the end. Steve?
Round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't you take a seat? Because we'll be moving on to the panel there. Okay. That was a good presentation from Mark. You know, one of the things that is obvious to me that you guys have forgotten. How's that? I've just told you what you've forgotten. You guys have forgotten that we live inside the safety and the civility that you provide. You forget how important what you do is. And the things that people like me just turn up to a building and take for granted. That it's comfortable and it's warm and it's cool and it's safe. Like, in modern societies, in Western markets, the civility that is provided by things that the average people don't think about, you've got to be proud of actually what happens. And you mentioned collaboration, I think at least 7 times.
Hopefully.
So you've achieved the objective. Remember, collaboration, we got enough of you here earlier this morning. I call it cheating. Same thing. So architects, remember, not to forget about these guys. Now, we're into our last bit of the day. It's panel time. And I would now like to welcome up the panel. So we've got, obviously, already we have Mark Harrison. Now we're going to have Menno de Long, who's going to join us up on the screen, patiently waiting 2 hours in the Middle East, which I think is underrated. That's fantastic. And also Sally Archer, if you'd like to come up as well. There she is. And we've also got Luke Belfield, who's our special guest. And I get to take a seat again. Do we have any? Okay. All right, good. I don't think we have any questions. We're a little bit in front.
Right.
I'm just going to take a little seat over in the corner. And now we've got the extra seat situation. We'll do this because I'm really into symmetry. I suffer from OCD, okay? Just in case you...
Do we need to move the seats?
But they're not really spaced in the way that I feel like they're a little bit asymmetrical. But I think we'll be okay. Are we going to get our boy up on the screen here?
Yeah, that's better.
Look at, no, I'm joking. That was a joke, everyone. You've got to relax. So I have a few questions here. And it's kind of interesting that we're talking about, I think, let's just go back to what obviously, we're talking about adopting technologies which enhance standards. And standards is the thing that I think modern civil society is built upon, really. Standards are really important. Otherwise, you've seen the electrical standards in Thailand. They're famous. Have you seen the wires in Thailand? We can't see any wires here, so we're in a good situation. So, welcome back. I don't know if you can... Yes, he can say. I wasn't sure that was the old... Welcome back. It's good to see you again. I'm excited. We're going to start with you, Menno. Within the construction industry being notoriously slow, let's just say sometimes slow to adopt new technologies, what do you see as the biggest and widespread adoption of digital, sustainable and circular technologies that you're implementing at NEOM to help overcome some of these barriers?
Yeah, I thank you for your question, and good to be back. Again, sorry to disturb your issues with symmetry in the seating arrangements. I hope you're fine. No, I really do see a lot of challenges with barriers in the adoption of digital technologies in our industry. There have even been some PhD students in the Netherlands that did quite a bit of research on that. So if you are interested, I can share some more information about that. But in my opinion, and I touched upon it a little bit in my presentation, it is really about this triangle of people, process and technology, where technology is not the main barrier, in my opinion. We have these great hardware and software providers that develop these great tools for us and hardware for us. And as long as these hardware and software environments meet our requirements, and if we can extract data from these software applications based on open interoperable methods, I think we're all fine on the technology side. But it becomes a bit more difficult when we talk about processes. We tend in our industry to just try to digitize our traditional manual processes just try to digitize them in a simple way. But it is important to re-engineer those processes and rethink our processes before we automate or digitize those. So really looking at your current traditional processes before you move into digital processes is very important to think about re-engineering these processes. And most important, in my opinion, is this focus on people, where we need to apply change management technologies and need to upskill our employees, need to train our employees. I think if you are not focused on that topic, you will be in a bad shape and you will never be successful in your digital transformation. And at NEOM, we are taking a lot of activities in this space. One of the important topics that we focus on is what we call our maturity measurement methodology, where we're looking into measuring the maturity of all the stakeholders in our NEOM ecosystem to actually see on what kind of level they are in their digital maturity. So there we are looking at technology and data, but also at other factors like how do employees in these companies communicate, and how do they communicate across companies. And that's more in the area of information management, for example. We also talk about or look at capabilities and skills, standards and processes which are in place, but there's strategy and governance. So it's really about measuring this maturity, and based on those outcomes, we train our people, upskill our people through some initiatives we have in the area of the what we call the Digital Transformation Academy. So people side of things is probably most important to overcome these barriers to implement digital technologies.
Yeah. It's so interesting. One of the things that was mentioned there was interoperability. In tech, we say, do you have adversarial interoperability, which means we can all use the same things to create a standard that's easy to implement. And it's easy to think you want to have your own technology. It's very rarely to your benefit. You need to have
Exactly.
we need to have that ability for all of us to use the same standard. I mean, imagine if Apple were running electricity in Australia. We'd all have different plugs and different toasters in the house, and every time you bought a toaster, it'd have a different plug. That'd be great, wouldn't it? That's what you get sometimes when you have an organisation that goes on its own path and has monopoly powers. The people side of it brings me to you, Sally. What's Built's approach in digital strategies with technology evolving so much, especially when deciding which technologies to implement, especially when it comes to standards?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that one's on. So I suppose with any new piece of technology, we have to assess, is it a fad, or is it a fad at least for our organisation? Or is there going to be, real use cases for our business? I think that's a really important thing to establish right at the beginning. We get all sorts of emails sent from across the business of, I've seen this really exciting thing, check it out, da-da-da-da-da. But being able to assess, is this something that we realistically could adopt at some point down the line? The next one is looking at, is the business ready for the change? Are we looking to digitise a process that's ready for it? Or are we looking to, digitise a process that's crap and then we're just going to get a crap digital process? And I suppose the other thing is, are our teams ready for it? Have they gone on that journey and are ready for that next bit of evolution? I suppose the next couple of things are looking at, how big is the potential impact to the business? Are we looking at something that's going to touch all of our projects, or is it something that we're going to roll out like ad hoc to solve a specific problem on a project? And then the last thing is, what are the resources that are required? Really for this, the procurement is the lesser cost. It's how much do we need to invest in learning and development for our teams to get it up and running? Is it something that we can get our project teams running with, or is it something that's going to be a specialist activity that our DE team will run with? And that, depending on how big of an impact business-wise, will have a big impact on our resourcing. Do we need to hire new people and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you mentioned there is it a fad? Because it can be a real paradox, because what we've been doing here today is you've got to adopt the technology, you've got to move straight into it. It doesn't mean you need to do it straight away. I know this sounds like the antithesis of everything we've all been saying, but as we know, there's often 3, 5, 10-year lag between when something arrives and when you should implement it. When you see an email or that latest thing come from whichever website you follow on the latest technology, you got to be careful not to try and implement it that afternoon. 100%. Because, for example, social media in the metaverse. When's the last time you put on a headset to just hang out with your friends, like approximately? When was the last time you did that? You never did it. So this is where we have to be careful on knowing whether or not it's a fad. And again, the other one I'll pick up on, those are really great answers, is if you've got a crap process and if you digitise crap. I've never heard it so articulately put, I must say. And I loved that, but it's true. If your process is broken in the first instance, making a digital mirror of that is not the answer. Sometimes you've got a great physical process or old school process, digitise it. If it's not great, that's your actually opportunity to say, is there a fork here? Really great stuff. So, I mean, a couple of the other things that I'm thinking about is, what are some of the issues when it comes to enforcing compliance or compliance systems and enforcement? I think this is one here that any of you can answer. But within the construction industry, how do we contribute to enhancing public trust, especially when, I mean, we had some horrific things that we've seen, that accidents happen. How do we go about that?
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
Okay.
I mean, from a government, there's so much you can speak about here too. By the way.
Yeah, of course.
And we don't want to replicate and have a digital filing cabinet. And I'd say compliance is a very strong word too. We need to cost what we're asking for, understand what we're asking for, build capability around what we're asking for. So that it's valued. I've had so many discussions around when we spend so much time and effort getting the data right, the processes right within a project, and then you go to hand it over to, say, asset management or facilities management, and it just falls over. Or someone starts off, but then it isn't maintained. And there needs to be value in that data to keep that maintenance and to keep that fresh. Otherwise, it quickly falls out of favour and can't be trusted.
Yeah, right, okay.
I would agree. Probably just adding to that, there is nothing more irritating, I suppose, on a project where you've been asked to deliver something and the question of the whole team is, well, why am I doing this? If that could be articulately answered, I think the drive for the teams to get round and actually deliver it, it would be a lot less cumbersome, I suppose, process.
Yeah, I mean, it's always that challenge on implementation. Sometimes the shift, it seems like you're wasting more energy and time moving towards it, but it's that time to save time is one of the first ones. Did you have some thoughts on that, Mark?
Just touching on the point that you raised about the cost. Ideally we would love to align all the standards. We'd like to make sure that we've picked the worst case. We're all doing the same thing. But I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't be a popular guy if I went to the States and told them that, hey guys, you're not actually doing it quite right.
They'd love that, wouldn't they?
They'd love it, probably as much as you guys would as well, But we have to kind of consider the cost. We have to consider the changes that we're making to the standards. First of all, and primarily, do they fit the needs? Are they going to achieve what we want them to achieve? But we also have to stand that, people are out there trying to make money. They're trying to run a business. So if you implement a change too fast, it's not going to get any buy-in. People are just not going to be able to do it. So we have to consider that. And I think that's really important that we understand that it's okay saying we can ignore costs. We can't. We're all here. We're all in business. We're all here to make money. Yes, we need to improve things. We need to align things. But we also have to have a consideration of you try and implement changes too fast and it won't work. It's got to be a gradual process. People have to have time to do this work. And we've experienced this firsthand with the European standards coming into force. Suddenly we had this shift that it became legislation, and it's like, okay, we've got to spend maybe £250,000 now, but we had time. We had some time to do it, and I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, just let me pick up on those challenges associated with oversight and change, because it's a commercial building. The word commercial there is a word we can't forget. How do you overcome that when there's something that needs to change because there's safety considerations, but there's a paradigm of, no, we don't do that because it would cost you? How do you overcome that? What's that process?
I think the thing is whilst we've had these real disasters that have happened, I think that fundamentally we have these things in place now. What we're trying to do is just improve them. So we're not kind of saying that everything's wrong, but what we're trying to do is enforce some changes. So I think we've got to be realistic. I think is probably the best word.
So what is realistic? If we're going to say the word realistic, what does that mean for everyone in this room, right? Because you've got legislation, you've got commercial reality, you've got safety concerns. What framework does the word realistic? What does that mean? Like, is that a time-based thing? What is it? Is it cost-benefit analysis?
I think it's all.
I think, if I may.
Here we go.
I hope you can hear me, or.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You were next, but you just jump in right now. I love it.
What I really think what is very important here is that if we want to enforce new ways of working and want to mandate new ways of working, I think culture is also a very important topic. I think in some cultures they really ask for these kind of mandates. For example, here in the Middle East, they love standards, they love procedures, they love mandating these kind of standards and procedures, and when these are in place, everybody automatically follows those standards. I've been working a long time in the Netherlands, where I'm originally from. There, it's completely different. If a standard is mandated, people try to find a way to not use those standards and do it in a completely different way. So culture is a very important aspect also in the way how we can and should mandate standards and work with standards. what I've seen in the Netherlands, for example, we have been mainly focused on, for example, in the ISO 19650 standard for information management in our industry, really about looking at the advantages of working with these kind of standards in the industry, and really have some sort of a self-motivation for companies to apply those standards instead of mandating them. And that really works. So culture is a very important thing I think, in mandating and enforcing ways of working.
I mean, Menno, I really love that idea of culture. I actually heard a definition of culture by a business thinker and technologist, Seth Godin, and this is how he defines culture. It's so interesting. And it's different everywhere you go. His definition of culture is people like us do things like this. If you just digest that sentence, you're going to see what a cultural paradigm is, where you are geographically, whether it's a family, an industry, a city, a country. Brings me to you, Luke. We've got to get through this here. So how does culture and the culture in Australia and the industry's culture affect legislative reforms that are necessary to give us an improved framework? How do you approach that?
Well, it is a humongous challenge, and I always say that there's another quote: culture is always in a state of degradation.
Okay, you're going to have to go into give us a couple of layers under that, because I'm just trying to digest that one.
Well, it's always about what do people value,
Right.
and if you don't value it, it falls apart.
Right, and the values, I guess, are in a state of flux at all times, right?
Yes.
So some things will drop out and new things will come in.
Yes, and to culture from a legislative or a government perspective, it's always about building social license. Like, what's socially acceptable in your community? What would people expect? What's your burning platform to getting this done? Like, how do we move this? What's the opportunity? And tech and digital transformation is a great opportunity at the moment, because the world is building so much infrastructure and there's only so few people to deliver it and so few materials to use.
Yeah. And so what's stronger in that burning platform to get people on board? Is it fear or hope?
People mostly are motivated by loss, but also I feel like the better motivator there is hope. But also, how do we relieve people's pain points and frustrations, and give them something that can help fix them, or fix something that they're doing, or make something more efficient? So yeah, it's a big luxury to go from nothing to something that's space age. We need to sort of address people's pain points along the way and grow that maturity over time.
Yeah, there's always this gap between the future. It's always that thing that's never quite there. There's always this bridge element, isn't it? It's like, well, when that arrives, we'll do this. Okay, I know that I'm between us and a cocktail together, so why don't we just go to one last question, and this is for everyone here, so maybe we can get a quick thought from everyone. I just want to know what you see as the role the collaborations and partnerships are playing in the construction industry and transforming it so that we can have a sustainable, better environment in terms of not just what we build, but the practices that get things built and maintained. So just maybe if we can go through everyone and...
Okay. Can you say that again?
Yeah, so well, in terms of collaboration and partnerships, to get a sustainable environment, what is the best practice for us to get the compliance that we need, both in the implementation and maintenance of buildings? Like, what do we need to do as an industry to get us to where we need to be from a compliance perspective?
Well, I think we've got to think forward. We've certainly got to consider, I mean, if we look at the services environment, obviously building owners now have a legal obligation, for example, to test all their fire dampers. That's become a major headache. Certainly in the UK, I can't speak for here, but that has become a major headache. So what's started to happen now is people designing them out of the systems because it's become such a major headache. So I think, in terms of buildings going forward and the maintenance and the, making sure that they remain how they need to be, we need to think about, can we access these things? Can we get to them? If we can't, then we design them out, but we design them out in such a way the building retains its safety.
It's almost like a form of planned obsolescence, isn't it? If you've got something in there, that creates a problem, you want to circumvent that. and go to the next solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, and talk about pain points. Unless it's painful enough, you won't design around it.
Yeah.
A lot of pain is better than a little bit of pain, people. That's the message right there. So what are some of your thoughts on that, on getting more compliance?
I would think that, it's genuine collaboration is really important, and that can be like at a higher level. What are the requirements of a project getting, the experts of all of your disciplines providing their feedback rather than just, one centralised point specifying that. And that again could translate to something a little bit more, micro, sitting in a services coordination meeting, everyone from that project team who's in that session genuinely working together to try and solve the problem, as opposed to, well, you do it, because this is the way we've set this process up. I think it's that genuine working together, collaborating with the project in mind. And I know that there's all sorts of, commercial arrangements and constraints and everything that does restrict that. But I suppose the pursuit of that.
I think that's a great point. We actually refreshingly are starting to see that. We are starting to see some of that happening. So that's really encouraging. Instead of just one group of people, actually a much wider audience and the right kinds of people together. We are starting to see that happen.
Yeah, it used to be that, even in consumer goods projects, I worked in that for a number of years, where it's like, oh no, that's production, no, that's logistics, so that's theirs. As long as your bit wasn't broken, you can just. But now there's more symbiosis between it. Menno, did you have some thoughts on enforcement and standards? Because there is a perception that Middle Eastern markets, it's kind of, and other Asian markets, it's a free-for-all. What's your perception on the enforcement of compliance and best practice in the Middle Eastern experience?
Yeah, looking in the Middle East, I think this enforcement is really working, and having standards in place that makes it work. Talking about collaboration and partnerships in the industry, I think it is very important to collaborate, and I've seen some very successful examples of that in the recent past in the work I've been doing, working closely with organizations, European organizations like ENCORD, which is a European network of construction companies for research, development and innovation. Having these kind of organization in place and collaborate across the industry with peers and partners to really elevate your ways of working has been proven very successful. Also organizations like Building Smart International developing open standards for the industry. If you see the number of volunteers and people that are collaborating in these kind of organizations, it's just amazing what can be developed. Sometimes it's going very slow because the pace slows down because there's too many people involved and too many organizations involved in these kind of initiatives. But I think it's essential to really make change in our industry. And maybe a last thought about that. I think it's not only about collaboration within our industry, within the construction industry, but also reach out to other industries and do cross-industry partnerships and collaboration. And I've done that in some previous work I did in the area of innovation in one of my previous companies. Really focus on open innovation and invite teams from other industries, car industry or aerospace or shipbuilding, to work together with us to solve challenges that we have in our industry. And that has been proven very successful. So I would urge to also look into cross-industry collaboration.
I mean, one of the interesting ones there, and you mentioned a couple, is obviously the aviation industry. It's the classic example of having standards which are relevant because it's international in that way. Ask any child under the age of 13 and they'll tell you, if you say, do you think we'll ever have a global government? And their answer is yes. They believe that we live in a global economy. They grew up with a connected economy, and yet we operate on this archipelago of standards around the world. So, Luke, you don't get off scot-free, you know that. you know that, right? So what do you think we need to see better enforcement and compliance? I mean, you're at the beachhead of this, so we'll close off with you, and then we'll close out the day.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is how do we demystify all of what we're talking about here? How do we simplify it enough that You know, it's like picking up an Apple iPhone or a Samsung, and stick away from a lot of the technical jargon or the challenges. How do we galvanise people together so there's not that us versus them? You know, government working with projects, subcontractors, solving problems, and really getting to the heart of things. It's being okay and safe space to say, oh, I don't understand I don't have any experience in this. How do we solve it? Let's think about how we solve this problem together. Sorry, and I think trying to have really simple ways to understand what we want as government, as a client, and provide that capability there, so reducing the barriers. And technologies is great at doing that. And Menno's right, like let's learn from other industries. I certainly worked in a few different industries where I've learned a lot and benefited a lot from, say, working in oil and gas space and petrochem, where I design ammonium nitrate facilities, for instance. And being able to work through 3D design models with international project teams, all working out of the same model. And multidiscipline that then connects into your procurement software, where you can do bulk requisitions. You can understand how many thousands of valves do you need, and when do they need to arrive on site, and having that linked with all the engineering data and all the other analysis programs. We're just not there in the civil construction space, so that type of sophistication with our technology, but I'd love to see it there.
Well, Shannon,
And don't take me wrong, it's cross-industry collaboration. It's not only about us learning from other industries, it's also other industries learning from the construction industry, because we have also unique propositions in our industry that other industries can learn from. So, and a good example is BMW reaching out to my previous company, really wanting to understand how we solved our information management problem in our industry with the vast amount of stakeholders, and have been able to manage this information management challenge. And BMW was very interested how we tackle that. So it's not only us learning from other industries, but also other industries learning from us.